October 3rd, 2023. 16-year-old Madison Turner was supposed to be asleep, but the raised voices coming from her parents' bedroom down the hall had woken her from a deep sleep. At first, she tried to ignore the muffled argument between her mother Carol and father James, assuming it was just another disagreement about finances or household responsibilities that adults seem to have periodically. But as Madison lay in her bed listening to her parents' voices grow more heated, she began to catch fragments of words that didn't make sense in the context of a normal marital argument. Words like truth, 16 years, biological, and can't keep lying drifted to the walls of the suburban home, creating a puzzle that Madison couldn't ignore. Curiosity and growing concern drove Madison out of her bed and into the hallway, where she pressed her ear against her parents' bedroom door and heard the conversation that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her family, her identity, and her entire life. "We can't keep this secret forever, Carol," her father James was saying, his voice strained with emotion Madison had never heard before. Madison is 16 years old. She's going to figure out eventually, especially when she starts asking questions about college applications and needs her birth certificate. "She doesn't need to know," Carol replied, her voice defensive and desperate. "We've kept this secret for 16 years. We can keep it until she's 18 and moves out for college. Why destroy her sense of security now?" "Because she's not actually our daughter," James shouted, his voice breaking with frustration and grief. "Because every day we keep lying to her is another day we're stealing her right to know who she really is and where she came from." Madison's world stopped. The words, "not actually our daughter," echoed in her mind as she tried to process what she was hearing from the people she had trusted completely for her entire life. "We raised her from birth." Carol was crying now. "We are her parents in every way that matters. The biology doesn't change the love. But it changes everything else," James replied. "It changes her medical history, her heritage, her right to know about her biological siblings, and her connection to family members who probably think about her every day." The conversation Madison was overhearing would reveal that her entire identity was built on lies, that the family she had never questioned was not her biological family, and that somewhere in the world, there were people who shared her DNA and had never known what happened to the daughter, sister, or granddaughter they had lost 16 years ago. Before that devastating October night, Madison Turner had lived what seemed like the ideal teenage life in the comfortable suburban home where Carol and James had raised her since infancy. She was an honor student, captain of her high school debate team, and genuinely close to the parents who had supported every aspect of her development and achievement. Madison had always been aware that she looked nothing like her parents. Carol was petite with blonde hair and blue eyes, while James was tall with brown hair and green eyes. Madison, on the other hand, had olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes that suggested Mediterranean or Hispanic heritage that neither of her parents possessed. But when Madison had asked about the family resemblance throughout her childhood, Carol and James had always provided reasonable explanations. "You look like your great-grandmother on Mom's side," or "Dad's family has some Italian ancestry that skipped a few generations." Madison had accepted these explanations because she had no reason to doubt the people who had loved and cared for her completely. Madison's relationship with her parents had been exceptionally close, built on open communication, shared interests, and mutual respect that made their family the envy of her friends' parents. Carol worked as a high school English teacher, while James was an accountant, and both had been deeply involved in Madison's education, extracurricular activities, and social development. Madison was the kind of daughter every parent dreams of having. Carol would often tell her friends. She's responsible, ambitious, kind to others, and genuinely seems to enjoy spending time with her family. Madison's academic achievements had been a source of enormous pride for Carol and James. She maintained a 4.0 GPA while participating in debate team, student government, and volunteer work at the local animal shelter. She had already been accepted to several prestigious universities with substantial scholarship offers, and her future seemed bright and clearly defined. But Madison's exceptional academic performance had also created the circumstances that would eventually expose her parents' deception. As she began preparing college applications and scholarship paperwork, Madison needed access to official documents that her parents had been carefully avoiding for 16 years. The first hint that something was wrong had come 3 weeks before Madison overheard the devastating conversation. She had asked her mother for her birth certificate to include with a scholarship application, and Carol had provided various excuses about needing to locate it in their important documents and make sure they had the official copy rather than the hospital copy. Madison had found Carol's evasiveness about the birth certificate slightly odd, but she hadn't suspected that her mother was stalling because the document would reveal that Madison's birth name was not Madison Turner, that her biological parents were not Carol and James Turner, and that her entire legal identity had been established through adoption procedures that had been kept secret from her for 16 years. The second hint had come when Madison's biology teacher assigned a genetics project that required students to trace physical traits through their family trees. Madison had struggled to find connections between her own appearance and her parents' physical characteristics, leading her to ask more detailed questions about their family's ethnic background and medical history. Carol and James had provided increasingly vague and contradictory answers to Madison's questions about family genetics, medical histories, and hereditary traits. Their obvious discomfort with topics that should have been straightforward family discussions had planted seeds of doubt in Madison's mind that would eventually grow into the curiosity that led her to eavesdrop on their bedroom conversation. Looking back, Madison would realize that her parents had been struggling with the burden of their secret for years, but that their love for her and fear of losing her had prevented them from having the honest conversation that could have brought their family closer together instead of tearing it apart. Madison's world was about to crumble as she discovered that everything she believed about her identity was a carefully constructed lie. But the most devastating part wasn't learning she was adopted. It was discovering that her parents had been willing to deny her the truth about herself for her entire life. As Madison continued listening at her parents' bedroom door, the conversation revealed details that made the betrayal even more heartbreaking than she could have initially imagined. Her adoption had not been a straightforward process involving willing birth parents who had made difficult but loving decisions about their child's future. Madison's mother was only 17 when she had her. Carol was explaining through tears. She was killed in a car accident when Madison was 6 months old, and the father was nowhere to be found. Madison's biological grandmother begged us to take her temporarily while she tried to get custody, but then she got sick with cancer and died before the legal process was completed. Madison felt like she was drowning as she learned that her biological mother was dead, that she had a biological grandmother who had died wanting to raise her, and that her adoptive parents had allowed her to grow up believing a completely fictional family history. There are biological siblings, James continued, his voice heavy with guilt. Madison has an older brother and a younger sister who were placed with other family members after their mother died. They've been separated for 16 years, and none of them know where the others ended up. The revelation that Madison had siblings she had never known about was devastating. She had often wished for brothers or sisters, and had grown up as an only child while her biological siblings were living their own lives, probably wondering about the baby sister who had disappeared from their family when their mother died. The biological family has been looking for her, Carol admitted. I get letters sometimes from lawyers representing Madison's aunt, asking if we have any information about what happened to her brother's children after he died. They never give up searching for those kids. Madison realized that somewhere in the world, there were relatives who had been searching for her for 16 years, sending letters to agencies and lawyers, hoping to reunite with the family members who had been scattered after their mother's tragic death. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Carol, Madison's biological brother, found us on social media last year. James said quietly. He sent me a message with pictures of himself and his sister. They look exactly like Madison. He wants to meet her and has been trying to contact her directly, but I've been blocking his messages and deleting his emails before Madison can see them. Madison's legs gave out, and she slid down the hallway wall as she realized that her biological brother had actually found her and had been trying to contact her for over a year, but her adoptive parents had been intercepting and blocking his attempts at communication. The people she had trusted most in the world had not only hidden her true identity, but had actively prevented her from connecting with biological siblings who were searching for her. The betrayal was so complete and so devastating that Madison felt like she was discovering that her entire life had been a lie. Madison's discovery that her biological siblings had been trying to reach her while her parents blocked their attempts would force her to confront the people she had trusted with everything. But the conversation that followed would reveal even more devastating truths about love, control, and the price of deception. Madison spent the rest of that night sitting on her bedroom floor, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the reality that her name wasn't Madison Turner, that her parents weren't her biological family, that she had siblings who had been searching for her, and that the people who claimed to love her most had been lying to her about fundamental aspects of her identity for her entire life. By dawn, Madison's shock had transformed into anger and determination to confront her parents about the deception that had shaped her entire existence. She waited until Carol and James were having breakfast in the kitchen, then walked downstairs with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I heard your conversation last night," Madison announced, standing in the doorway of the kitchen where her parents were drinking coffee and pretending that their world wasn't about to explode. Carol dropped her coffee mug, which shattered on the kitchen floor. James's face went white as he realized that their 16 years of careful deception had finally been exposed. "Madison, sweetheart, we can explain," Carol began, but Madison cut her off with a voice that was surprisingly steady considering the emotional earthquake she was experiencing. "My name isn't Madison Turner, is it?" Madison asked. "My biological mother died when I was 6 months old, and I have siblings who have been looking for me. Is that correct?" The silence that followed confirmed everything Madison had overheard during her parents' conversation. Carol began crying, while James struggled to find words that could possibly justify 16 years of lies about their daughter's identity. "Madison, we love you more than anything in the world," James finally said. "Everything we did was to protect you and give you the best possible life. We never meant to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me?" Madison's composure began to crack. "You let me grow up believing my entire identity was something completely different from reality. You have pictures of my biological siblings, and you've been blocking their attempts to contact me for over a year. How is that protecting me?" Carol tried to explain their reasoning. "We were terrified that if you knew about your biological family, you would choose them over us. We couldn't bear the thought of losing you after raising you since you were a baby. So instead of risking that I might choose to have relationships with both families, you decided to eliminate my choice entirely by lying to me about their existence?" Madison's anger was building as she realized the selfish motivation behind her parents' deception. "You stole my right to know my own siblings. You stole my connection to my biological mother's memory. You stole my medical history, my ethnic heritage, and my family traditions. And you did it all because you were afraid I might love other people in addition to loving you." The confrontation continued for hours, with Madison demanding answers to questions she had never known she should ask, and Carol and James struggling to justify decisions that seemed increasingly indefensible when exposed to daylight. Madison's confrontation with her parents would reveal the full scope of their deception, but would also force her to make an impossible choice between the family who had raised her and the biological siblings who had never stopped searching for her. During their devastating kitchen conversation, Carol and James revealed the complete truth about Madison's origins and the elaborate measures they had taken to hide her biological family from her. The story was even more complex and heartbreaking than Madison had initially understood. Madison's biological mother, Isabella Rodriguez, had been a 17-year-old high school student when she died in a car accident. Isabella had been raising Madison and her 2 other children, Carlos, age 5, and Sophia, age 2, as a single mother while living with their maternal grandmother, Rosa Rodriguez. When Isabella died, Rosa had been determined to keep all 3 grandchildren together, but she was already in the early stages of cancer and didn't have the financial resources to gain legal custody of 3 young children. Social services had decided that the children needed to be placed in separate homes that could provide immediate stability. Carlos had been placed with Isabella's sister Maria, who lived in New Mexico. Sophia had been adopted by Isabella's cousin Anna in Texas. Madison, as the youngest and most vulnerable at 6 months old, had been placed with Carol and James, who were experienced foster parents hoping to adopt an infant. "We were supposed to be your temporary placement while Rosa fought for custody," Carol admitted. But Rosa's cancer progressed quickly, and she died before the legal process was completed. "At that point, we had been caring for you for 8 months, and we couldn't imagine giving you up." The adoption had been finalized when Madison was 2 years old, but Carol and James had promised Rosa before her death that they would maintain Madison's connection to her biological siblings and Mexican heritage. Instead, they had moved across the country and changed Madison's name to eliminate any paper trail that could connect her to her biological family. Rosa made us promise that you would know your siblings and learn about your mother's family, James admitted, tears streaming down his face. She died believing that you would grow up knowing where you came from. We broke that promise because we were selfish and scared. Madison learned that her biological brother Carlos, now 21, had been searching for her since he turned 18. He had hired private investigators, contacted adoption agencies, and used social media to try to locate the baby's sister who had disappeared from his life when he was 5 years old. Sophia, now 18, had also been searching for her siblings and had recently connected with Carlos through a DNA testing website. Together, they had been systematically trying to find Madison, following paper trails and contacting potential leads for over 2 years. They have pictures of your mother, Carol said quietly. They have stories about what she was like, family recipes, and traditions that connect you to your heritage. Carlos remembers playing with you when you were a baby, and Sophia has been saving birthday presents for you every year since she was old enough to understand that she had a missing sister. Madison realized that while she had been growing up as an only child wondering what it would be like to have siblings, her biological brother and sister had been grieving her absence and actively searching for ways to reunite their family. I want to contact them, Madison said firmly. I want to see the pictures of my biological mother, learn about my family's culture, and meet the siblings who have been looking for me. Carol and James's reaction was immediate panic. Madison, please don't make any hasty decisions, Carol begged. You're angry right now, and you're not thinking clearly about the consequences. But Madison had never been more clear about anything in her life. The parents who had claimed to love her unconditionally had proven that their love came with conditions. Specifically, the condition that she remain ignorant about her true identity and isolated from her biological family. Madison's decision to contact her biological siblings would set in motion a reunion that had been 16 years in the making. But reconnecting with her lost family would also force her to navigate the complex emotions of loving people who had lied to her while embracing relationships that felt both foreign and familiar. Against Carol and James's desperate protests, Madison used the social media information her father had revealed to contact her biological brother Carlos that same afternoon. The message she sent was simple but life-changing. Hello, my name is Madison Turner, but I think my birth name was Isabella Rodriguez. I believe you are my brother, and I want to meet you. Carlos's response came within an hour and included photographs that removed any doubt about their biological connection. Madison and her siblings shared the same dark eyes, olive skin, and facial structure that clearly marked them as family. But more than physical resemblance, Carlos's message contained an emotional connection that Madison had never experienced. Isabella, we have been looking for you since the day you disappeared from our lives, Carlos wrote. Sophia and I have talked about you every week for 16 years. We have pictures of you with Mama, stories about what you were like as a baby, and so much love that we've been saving for the day we found you. The photos Carlos shared showed Madison as an infant with Isabella Rodriguez, a beautiful young woman who looked like an older version of Madison herself. There were pictures of Madison playing with Carlos and Sophia, images that proved she had once been part of a loving biological family before being separated and placed for adoption. Mama died when you were 6 months old, but she talked about you constantly during those 6 months, Carlos continued. She used to say you were going to be strong and smart like her, and that you would do amazing things with your life. She would be so proud to know that you found us. Madison cried as she looked at photographs of herself with a mother she had never known, but who had clearly loved her completely during their brief time together. Isabella had been young, but the picture showed a devoted mother who had been committed to raising her children despite difficult circumstances. Within a week of their initial contact, Carlos and Sophia had driven from their respective homes to meet Madison in person. The reunion took place at a restaurant halfway between Madison's home and where Carlos lived, and the emotional impact was immediate and overwhelming for all 3 siblings. The moment I saw Madison walk into that restaurant, I knew she was our sister, Sophia would later recall. She moved like Mama. She had the same expressions, and when she smiled, it was like seeing our mother's face again. The three siblings spent 8 hours talking about their separate lives, sharing memories of their biological mother, and trying to fill in 16 years of separation. Carlos and Sophia had grown up knowing they had a missing sister, visiting Isabella's grave together every year on her birthday, and maintaining connections to their Mexican heritage that Madison had been denied. We always knew you were out there somewhere, Carlos told Madison. Sophia and I made a pact when we were teenagers that we would never stop looking for you, no matter how long it took or how difficult the search became. Madison learned that her biological family had rich traditions, cultural connections, and extended relatives who had never forgotten about the baby who had been lost to the family after Isabella's tragic death. But reconnecting with her biological siblings also created enormous conflict with Carol and James, who interpreted Madison's relationship with Carlos and Sophia as a rejection of the family who had raised her. Madison's reunion with her biological siblings would force her to navigate the impossible challenge of honoring both families, while processing the betrayal of 16 years of deception. But the choice she made would define her identity and her future in ways she never could have imagined. The months following Madison's reunion with Carlos and Sophia were the most emotionally complex of her life. She was simultaneously experiencing the joy of connecting with biological siblings who had never stopped loving her, and the pain of recognizing that her relationship with Carol and James might never recover from their deception. Carol and James struggled to accept Madison's relationship with her biological siblings, interpreting every conversation, visit, and shared experience as evidence that Madison was choosing her real family over the parents who had raised her. "We gave you everything," Carol said during one of their increasingly difficult conversations. "We sacrificed our own desires to have biological children so we could focus completely on raising you. How can you just throw that away for people who are strangers to you?" Madison's response revealed how much she had matured during the months since discovering the truth about her identity. "You didn't give me everything. You gave me love, stability, and opportunities, and I'm grateful for those things. But you also took away my knowledge of my biological mother, my relationships with my siblings, and my connection to my cultural heritage. You can't claim credit for giving me everything when you deliberately withheld fundamental parts of my identity." The situation became more complicated when Madison decided to spend part of her Christmas vacation with Carlos and Sophia, visiting their biological mother's grave and meeting extended family members who had been mourning her absence for 16 years. The experience of visiting Isabella Rodriguez's grave with her siblings was transformative for Madison. She was able to mourn the mother she had never known, while also celebrating the life that Isabella had given her and the love that connected her to Carlos and Sophia. "Standing at our mother's grave with my brother and sister felt like coming home in a way I had never experienced before," Madison reflected. "It wasn't about rejecting Carol and James, but about finally understanding where I came from and who I was beyond the identity they had created for me." Madison's biological extended family welcomed her with overwhelming love and acceptance. She met aunts, uncles, and cousins who shared family stories, cultural traditions, and genetic traits that explained aspects of her personality and appearance that had never made sense in the context of Carol and James's family. But the reunion with her biological family also forced Madison to confront difficult questions about loyalty, gratitude, and the meaning of family that had no easy answers. "I love Carol and James," Madison explained to Carlos and Sophia. "They raised me, supported my education, and gave me opportunities that I might not have had otherwise. But I also love you, and I love the connection I feel to our mother's memory and our family's heritage. I shouldn't have to choose between loving different parts of my family." Madison's decision was to maintain relationships with both families, while establishing clear boundaries about honesty and respect that would allow her to move forward without betraying either set of relationships. Madison's senior year of high school became a journey of integrating two family identities while preparing for a future that would honor both her adoptive family support and her biological family's heritage. The process was complicated by ongoing tension between Carol and James's desire for exclusivity and Madison's determination to maintain relationships with her biological siblings. Family therapy became essential for helping Carol, James, and Madison navigate their complex emotions and rebuild trust that had been damaged by 16 years of deception. The therapy process forced all three of them to confront painful truths about love, control, and the difference between protection and manipulation. Carol and James had to learn that loving Madison meant supporting her relationships with her biological family, even if those relationships made them feel threatened, explained Dr. Michelle Torres, the family therapist who worked with them for over a year. Madison had to learn to separate her anger about being lied to from her gratitude for being raised with love and stability. The breakthrough in their family therapy came when Carol and James finally acknowledged that their deception had been motivated by their own insecurities rather than Madison's best interests. "We were afraid that if you knew you had another family who wanted you, you would realize that we were replaceable," Carol admitted during one of their therapy sessions. "We convinced ourselves that we were protecting you, but we were really protecting ourselves from the possibility of losing you." Madison's response was both compassionate and firm. "You were never replaceable. You were my parents for 16 years, and that relationship is permanent regardless of what other relationships I develop. But you made me replaceable in my biological family by cutting me off from them without my consent. You took away my choice to love multiple families simultaneously." The therapy process helped Madison understand that her anger was justified, while also recognizing that Carol and James's fear had been based on love, even though their actions had been harmful. By the spring of her senior year, Madison had developed a new family structure that included regular communication with Carlos and Sophia, occasional visits with extended biological relatives, and a slowly rebuilding relationship with Carol and James that was now based on honesty rather than deception. Madison's college choice reflected her integration of both family identities. She decided to attend a university that would allow her to study both business administration, inspired by James's career, and Mexican-American studies, to learn about her biological heritage. Her scholarship essay about discovering her identity through family reunion was so compelling that it earned her additional financial aid. At Madison's high school graduation, both families were present, Carol and James sitting proudly in the audience they had occupied for years, while Carlos, Sophia, and several biological relatives attended their first milestone celebration for the family member who had been missing for so long. Madison's graduation speech, delivered as class valedictorian, addressed the theme of identity and truth in ways that resonated with her entire community. "We often think that having a complicated family background is a disadvantage, but I've learned that it can also be a source of strength. I am Madison Turner, the daughter who was raised with love and high expectations by parents who sacrificed to give me opportunities. I am also Isabella Rodriguez, the sister who was separated from siblings who never stopped searching for me, and the daughter of a mother whose memory connects me to a rich cultural heritage. The truth about our identities might be complicated, but it's always better than living with lies, even comfortable lies that seem designed to protect us. I am grateful for both of my families, and I am proud to be someone who doesn't have to choose between loving the people who raised me and loving the people who share my DNA." Madison is now in her sophomore year of college, maintaining close relationships with both her adoptive and biological families. She speaks fluent Spanish, cooks traditional Mexican dishes she learned from her biological relatives, and has become an advocate for adoptee rights and family reunification. Carol and James have developed a friendship with Carlos and Sophia, united by their shared love for Madison and their commitment to supporting her happiness. They now celebrate some holidays together, creating new family traditions that honor both of Madison's heritage backgrounds. "Learning the truth about my family was devastating initially, but ultimately made all of us stronger," Madison reflects. "I learned that I could survive having my entire identity questioned, and my parents learned that love doesn't diminish when it's shared with more people." Madison's story has inspired other adoptive families to have honest conversations about biological connections and cultural heritage, proving that families can be stronger when they're built on truth rather than comfortable deceptions. If Madison's journey of family discovery and identity integration has moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who might be struggling with questions about their own family histories. Subscribe for more stories of people who found strength through truth, even when that truth was painful to discover. And remember, your identity is complex and multifaceted, and you have the right to know and embrace all parts of who you are.